And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Monday morning's flying weather graphic. Again, lower conditions in the east and central interior and better out west. Not too bad for the Aleutians here. Some VFR from Adak-Atka into the eastern Aleutians. VFR along much of the southwest coast, Bristol Bay to Kodiak Island, right on up into the western Brooks Range. North slope, mostly marginal VFR. And zone of IFR here through the east central interior from the Brooks Range all the way down to western Cook Inlet. A little bit hanging in western Prince William Sound. And then this batch mostly off the southeast coast. And for the afternoon, that rolls right up to the coastline tomorrow afternoon with central and north coast of the Panhandle IFR, much of the North Gulf Coast, but Prince William Sound VFR. And then some areas of marginal VFR still over the Kenai Peninsula on up in northern Cook Inlet, Manuska Valley and Copper River Basin, mostly marginal. And for the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, and along and north of the Alaska Range, IFR for the north slope out to the eastern Arctic coast, and just marginal VFR, quite a widespread area of that over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians to the Alaska Peninsula. Then Tuesday morning, about the same pattern. Central east side has the IFR all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast. The VFR here through the western interior from the Kobuk Valley, Kotzebue, even the Noatak Valley down to Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island. Marginal VFR out to the west covering the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And then for Tuesday afternoon forecast, some VFR finally showing up over the southern Panhandle. And IFR from Prince William Sound across the Copper River Basin, north and northwest across the east central interior, and then becoming widespread there along the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast. Good VFR here over the western interior, Bristol Bay from actually Selawik, Kobuk Valleys down to Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, and into the western Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, looking pretty good for Tuesday afternoon. Marginal VFR over the Bering Sea, some VFR breaking out over the Aleutians, and the next batch of IFR out here to the west-northwest. And for passes, Brooks Range and Atuvik, IFR. Adigan, go marginal VFR there, a little optimistic for that pass. Lake Clark and Merrill, both looking marginal tomorrow. Rainy, IFR, windy, IFR, especially on the northern entrance. Isabel, IFR, especially northern approach, and that same forecast from Antasta as well. And for Tanita, marginal VFR. And Portage, marginal VFR as well. Could go VFR in the eastern entrance there, possibly. And for Chilkoot and White, IFR, but slowly improving into the afternoon and evening. Freezing levels, about 2,000 feet now, all the way down into southern Alaska here to about Nunivak Island. And 2,000 to 3,000 feet down to the Aleutians there, and roughly 4,000 to 8,000 feet across the southeast coast. And as far as icing goes, all clear out here, western interior across the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, nothing significant at all. Some considerable moderate rime icing, central interior, eastward there to the Canadian border, and then down into the northern Panhandle. And from there, looking at the jet stream, south to north flow here over the eastern interior, 65 to 75 knots. Lighter southerly flow over the southeast coast. And then coming up over the top of this high pressure area centered over the west central Aleutians, got westerly turning northwest winds at about 65 to 70 knots. And for the 9,000 foot wind flow chart, a couple of low centers here over the interior. Another one there near or just south of or southeast of Yakutat. Northwest winds, 30 to 35 knots, eastern Bering Sea, eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, and then this low actually pulling northwestward here, bringing the strong winds into the Panhandle, 40 to 60 knots out of the southwest, east 35 knots for the western Arctic coast. And even stronger winds up there at 3,000 feet, easterlies 45 to 50 knots blowing across the north slope and Arctic coast. Southwest 50 knots there into the Panhandle, northwest 35 knots across the Alaska Peninsula, but up to 40 knots there blowing through the Kamishak Gap. And for turbulence, light to isolated moderate turbulence there for the Brooks Range area. Moderate turbulence here for the western Alaska Range down across the Barren Islands, southern Kenai Peninsula, Sitkinak Island, all of the Alaska Peninsula, as well as the Panhandle.